Geek Therapy Radio.
Welcome to the Geek Therapy Radio broadcast. I promise in this episode we will stick to the geekiness. Thank you for letting me get it out of my system. In the week prior, I kind of went off. The second, third thing was segment was pretty opinionated. So I thank you for bearing with me. Especially thank you to any, those of you out there who might lean conservative. It's just what I know from the past 12 years of doing radio. It's only what I could speak to. It's not a shot at anybody individually. It's not a shot at any hosts individually. It's not a shot at any listeners individually. But I just, I like to, every once in a while, I feel like I need to expose what's really going on once in a while behind the scenes of corporate radio. I'm a geek about things. I like to kind of peel the cover back a little bit and see how the inner workings go and tell you guys how the inner workings go. But it dances way too close to the line and over the line of getting into political opinion. So thank you for bearing with me, but I promise that this episode is going to be full geekiness, and I'll keep it in mind, and I'll keep reminding myself, and y'all will keep reminding me too, to kind of keep it on geek here at Geek Therapy Radio. So that's exactly what we are going to do now. The first story that I wanted to bring up is, for those of you who don't know, maybe some of you aren't into cryptocurrency mining. You've heard of cryptocurrency, you've heard the term mining. You basically know what it is. If you know a little bit more about what it is, if you're a little bit more in tune with cryptocurrency mining and Ethereum mining and Bitcoin mining and Dogecoin mining and all that kind of stuff, and you are a PC gamer at the same time, you know how hard it is to get graphics cards. I've talked about how hard it is to get new graphics cards and even used graphics cards here on Geek Therapy Radio ad nauseum. A few weeks ago, wherever it was, Nvidia announced that they were going to release the RTX 3060. It's a 12 gigabyte GPU. It's very highly anticipated. It's supposed to be kind of this mid-tier, not necessarily mid-tier, entry-level to high-end gaming, I would call it, because there are graphics cards like the 1660 Ti and other graphics cards that are really more budget oriented, and I use air quotes with budget because there's no such thing as a budget GPU right now in the year 2021. But the 3060, it's kind of the lower end of the 3000 series of graphics cards from Nvidia. So you have the 3060, 3070, 3080, and the 3090. And the 3060 was going to be this sweet spot, the RTX 3060, kind of this awesome sweet spot of graphical horsepower to run games and do it at a reasonable price. I don't even know what the MSRP. Let me look up what the MSRP was supposed to be for the RTX 3060. I want to say it was around $300 or $400 or so MSRP, but there's no way that that's actually happening. Oh yeah, that's right. I remember commenting on this back when they announced it, and the whole PC gaming community rolled their eyes. Nvidia said the RTX 3060 is going to be available for $329, and the entire PC community laughed their butts off. There's no freaking way you will be able to pick up an RTX 3060 for $330. One of the main reasons is cryptocurrency miners and what's the term I'm looking for? Scalpers, high demand and low production. There's just no way. There's absolutely no way you're going to walk into a Best Buy or a Micro Center or wherever, or cruise around Amazon or cruise around eBay and find an RTX 3060 for $329. It probably will never happen. It's probably going to be a few years before you can find an RTX 3060 for $330. It's going to be, my estimate, it's going to be at least one or two, possibly 2 generations old, if not 3 generations old. No, 3 generations is too far. I'm guessing if we're going by the numbers roadmap here, let's say the RTX 4000 series, comes out. I'm not saying the next one's going to be the 4000 series, but let's say the next generations of Nvidia GPU comes out as the 4000 series. I'm predicting by that nomenclature that by the time we get to the 5000 series, that's when the 3000 series cards will start to go for their original MSRP, their original 2020 MSRPs. It basically all revolves around when we get through this pandemic, when supply issues are sorted out, and when the cryptocurrency mining bubble bursts again, and when we get a flood of these cards back on the market. I don't think we are going to see an RTX 3060 for $329 for at least 2 years. It's going to be used by at least 1 or 2 generations before you can get one for an actual $329. That said, if the cryptocurrency mining bubble bursts again, and we get through the pandemic and supply issues and chip shortages are over with, maybe in a couple years you'll get an RTX 3060 for less than $329. After the last bubble burst in 2018, there was this kind of magical period where graphics cards were super cheap. You could get awesome graphics cards for like $150 that have been used to mine currency. We'll talk about that in a second, whether or not you should buy a card that was used to mine currency if you're going to get lower performance or what that means. But the last time the bubble burst was a great time to build a PC. PC prices like 2019, around that era, was awesome for building a PC because we had a flood of used graphics cards for cheap that were just as good as original. PC parts were cheap, RAM was cheap, storage was cheap. Solid state is cheaper now than it was in 2019, more or less. But it was a great time to build a PC. So bringing it back to the RTX 3060. When Nvidia announced it, they announced also that it would have a quote-unquote unhackable hash limiter. That doesn't mean drugs. That means for cryptocurrency mining and hashing cryptocurrency blockchains, that the 3060 was going to be safeguarded from Bitcoin miners scooping them all up because Nvidia was going to make the 3060 unhackable for full productivity Bitcoin mining or Ethereum mining, cryptocurrency mining, that it would be severely limited to that capacity. Well, guess what? Hackers almost instantaneously figured out a way around it. I'll tell you what the way around it was. Maybe I should or shouldn't, but I'll just tell you anyways, because it's not like you're going to find a 3060. They found a way around it, as we knew they would, but something more egregious happened. Something more mind-exploding happened, and unforgivable happened then and now from Nvidia itself, and we'll talk about that in the next segment coming up. Don't go anywhere. More Geek Therapy Radio coming up. Follow Geek Therapy Radio on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, all that good stuff. Just look for the red, white, and black color scheme, and that's me. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. You've got your mental curator, Johnny Hamburger, just reminding you can grab the podcast in your favorite podcast app. Of course, we around here prefer the iHeartRadio app. But if you listen on Apple Podcasts, if you listen on Spotify or Spreaker or Google Podcasts or Pocket Casts on Android, whatever you listen to podcasts with, you can find the Geek Therapy Radio podcast there. Just search for Geek Therapy Radio podcast and be sure to look for the red, white, and black color scheme. Kind of interesting that just popped into my mind, and we'll talk about the RTX 3060 and Nvidia here in a second. But as I'm mentioning it, I was reading this. Oh, where was I reading it? It was kind of this insider information on how to make a successful podcast. And one of the things I read, it was basically interviewing a lot of creators and a lot of network owners. So a lot of podcasts are owned by kind of bigger parent podcast companies like Earwolf and such like that does the Comedy Bang Bang podcast. There's a lot of podcasts that exist underneath these separate podcast companies. So they were interviewing, who was it? I'm forgetting exactly what company it was, what the podcast company it was, but the owner of the company who started podcasting back in like 2004, 2005. By the way, podcasts are called podcasts because you could download them to your iPod back in the day, podcast. Basically, he said, if you want to create a new podcast, do not create a geek-oriented podcast. And I was like, oh, great. Glad I did that a couple years ago. Wonderful. I mean, yes, this is a radio show. It is 2021, so a lot of people listen to podcasts, obviously. And he was just saying for his network, when you pitch a new show that you want to be included on their network, they're just saying it's not impossible to get a geek-related podcast going on their network or sponsored on their network, but there's thousands of geek-related podcasts. So if you want to be original and stand out, maybe not go with the geek genre. So welcome to the Geek Therapy Radio podcast on the radio. But again, they were saying we're not that you shouldn't start a geek-related podcast, just that it's been done, and that if you want one to stand out, you have to figure out an angle, figure out a way for it to stand out. And I have maintained since I first started Geek Therapy Radio, and how I encouraged other people to create content, or if they wanted advice on creating content, that people, whoever subscribed to me right now, if you're listening right now and you have subscribed to the Geek Therapy Radio podcast, it's not just because you subscribed to the kind of content and the data that I'm putting out there. It's because you've subscribed to me. And a lot of times when we subscribe to podcasts and we get we see a new notification on our phone or whatever, that a new podcast from Waveform, MKBHD has come out, or a new podcast from Austin Evans or whoever has come out. These are big YouTubers who have also wisely started podcasts. That it's because you're familiar with that person. It's kind of like a safe space in your mind and heart, and a familiarity with that person, that creator. So it's not necessarily that you're tuning in to hear Marques Brownlee talk about a new iPhone. It's that you're tuning in to hear Marques Brownlee talk about almost anything. Yes, of course, you want him to stick on the topic, but you become familiar with Marques, you become familiar with Austin Evans, you've become familiar with Comedy Bang Bang and all those comedians I cast. It's something comforting, and you look forward to that comfort each week or whenever they release the podcast. So I know that when you subscribe to Geek Therapy Radio, it's not just that you're subscribing to the actual topics that I'm talking about. I know a lot of it is that you are subscribing to me. And I've said from the beginning that I like to think that I'm building a family here. No, obviously I can't come out and visit all of you all the time or talk to you individually 24 hours a day. But I mean, if you email me, I'm pretty good about getting back to you. Really good, actually. Just ask anybody who ever emails me. I usually respond pretty quick. And if I don't respond pretty quick, it means something fell through the cracks and I'm sorry, and I eventually get to you. But feel free to email me. That's a good segue. Johnny@geektherapyradio.com, JOHNNY @geektherapyradio.com. You can also just go to geektherapyradio.com, and the first thing you see is a form. And I reinstate every time I mention that it's not signing you up for any sort of mailing list. There's no advertisements, no nothing like that. It's literally just to send me like a direct message. So that's that. When you subscribe to a podcast, if you subscribe to Geek Therapy Radio, there's something other than the topics as to why you subscribed to this podcast. It has something to do with me. Maybe you like the way I deliver things. Maybe you hate the way I deliver things. Maybe you like me. Maybe you don't like me. you for some reason you want to listen to me to like me, or you want to listen to me to hate me. Whatever. You subscribe for different reasons other than me talking about graphics cards. So segueing back to graphics cards, the RTX 3060 was hacked for cryptocurrency mining almost instantaneously. We all knew that that would happen. Everybody in the PC community, PC gaming community, in the PC mining or cryptocurrency mining community knew that despite Nvidia saying that their 3060 would be unhackable for full output cryptocurrency mining, that the cryptocurrency mining community would figure out a way around that almost instantly. And the way they figured out a way around that, I'll just tell you, because it's not like you're going to go out and find a 3060 anytime soon just sitting on a shelf. The way they figured out a way around that is as simple as a PCIe riser and an HDMI plug. So they plug the HDMI port with a dummy HDMI plug, and then they use a PCIe riser to bypass the hash rate limiter that exists only when it's connected directly to the PCIe slot. So those two things bypassed the hash rate limiter. Oh, that's so that's egregious. That's not the really egregious thing. That's egregious in how simply it was bypassed. That shows you that Nvidia really didn't care. They didn't put any effort into it. That talking out of one side of their mouths when they were talking about, yeah, we're going to make this, really hard to cryptocurrency mine on. So that way gamers can actually get their hands on these cards. Gamers and content creators can actually get their hands on a 3060 to do real work or do real gaming. It's not just going to be Bitcoin miners or cryptocurrency miners out there scooping them all up so gamers and content creators don't have anything to be left with. That wasn't the case. Nvidia was full of crap. They were full of crap, and they knew they were full of crap. It was lip service. And why was it lip service? Like, why did they, when they knew that it would be hacked, it's not really even a hack. They knew that it would be bypassed quickly. Nvidia freaking knew this. So why would they even mention that there was a hash limiter in place? To save face in front of gamers and content creators? What's the point? It's so hollow. There's this kind of term out there that's called undersell, overdeliver. Basically, what Nvidia should have done is not mention the hash rate limiter at all. Maybe what they should have done, if Nvidia was actually confident that this 3060 could not be used for cryptocurrency mining, they should have actually included some sort of even more unbypassable prevention for hash rates and for Bitcoin mining, for cryptocurrency mining. Made it virtually impossible, or actually made it really, really hard to implement a bypass. But Nvidia didn't do that. So why did they even mention it? That's a rhetorical question. There's no real answer to that. I just don't understand the marketing. Oh, we need to save face. But sir, they're going to figure it out in less than 24. Doesn't matter. They throw the guy out the window. What's that meme where the guy mentions something reasonable and then the company just tosses him out the skyscraper window? That's basically what Nvidia did. The actual egregious part about this, though, what made it apparent that Nvidia didn't care, that it was all just hot air, it all just didn't matter, it was all just lip service, is that one of their beta drivers completely unlocked Bitcoin mining, or completely unlocked cryptocurrency mining, completely lifted that hash rate limiter. Nvidia's own driver, quote unquote, accidentally lifted that hash rate limiter. Nvidia has since taken the driver down, but come on. One day you're saying it's impossible, we're severely limiting cryptocurrency mining on this thing, and then the next day you release a driver that fully unlocks it, and then whoopsie daisy, we take it back down again. Bull crap, Nvidia. Bull crap. That's like, it's unforgivable, but it's like, what option do we have as gamers? Yes, you can say go over to Team Red, but I'll talk about why that's going to AMD is not always the answer for everybody. More Geek Therapy Radio coming up. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. You've got your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger. Go to geektherapyradio.com for more information about Geek Therapy Radio and to contact me directly. Again, that form, the first thing you see on the homepage of Geek Therapy Radio, is not any sort of mailing list to sign up. It's literally just to tell me what your geek thing is or make comments about the show or whatever. Here's something that just popped into my mind before we get on to Nvidia and AMD graphics cards and Bitcoin mining and content creation and gaming here in a second. Here's something that just popped into my mind. I always forget to mention this. If you listen to the Geek Therapy Radio podcast on Apple Podcasts, and I know you do because I can see the metrics, and a huge portion of you listen to the Geek Therapy Radio podcast on Apple Podcasts. If you do so, would y'all mind tossing a rating up there? I haven't even checked it in a while. I just know that every time I do check it, I'm just like, man, for as many people listen to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, not too many people throw a star rating or write a review for it. That's a lot to ask. I mean, it's one thing to ask for a star rating. It's another thing to ask to write a review. So I'm not asking necessarily to write a review. And I'm also not asking necessarily for you to give it 5 stars. Most people, kind of last time I checked a few months ago, most people did give it 5 stars, and there's not a ton of ratings. But most people did give it 5 stars. And then there was one turkey that came along several months ago that gave it 1 star. This guy followed me around on all the social media stuff. He was my first kind of stalker. It didn't last very long. It only lasted a few days. He went around to my YouTube channels. He went around to Instagram and Twitter and stuff like that. And it was just being like, this guy sucks. This guy's terrible. Whatever. I'm like, man, you were obsessed. Why like most people, not to get too derailed here, but most people, if you don't like a podcast, or if you don't like a movie, if you don't like a thing, if you don't like a radio show, you just turn the channel or you stop listening to it or whatever, and that's that. It always makes me kind of wonder, like the mind of a bully, if you didn't like something, why would you then follow that content creator around to tell them how terrible what they're doing is? It makes that person seem off kilter, that like they need help. And what I mean is their words don't really hold any water. It would mean something if it was a one-off thing and it was a really critical type of review that was kind of kill them with kindness type of thing. Like if someone leaves a criticism that's very well thought out and very kind of analytical and surgical, and they bring out the scalpel and they dice up the reason why Geek Therapy Radio just isn't that great, that holds way more weight. That cuts way more to the core than just somebody following you around on all your platforms telling you suck. Well, why? Like, you're not giving any reason. You're just being a bully and telling me why I suck or why you think I suck. And that's a little bit, I'm concerned for you at this point why you would follow me around everywhere to tell me that. Because usually, if, like I mentioned, if somebody doesn't like something, they just stop listening to it. They just stop watching it. And it's not really a big deal. So anyways, all that back around to say, if you are listening on to Geek Therapy Radio podcast on Apple Podcasts, if you're so inclined, leave a star rating. Like I said, you don't have to leave 5 stars. I would like it if you left 5 stars, but you don't have to. If you think it's 2 stars, if you think it's 3 stars, even if you think it's 1 star, just interact in that way. That'd be cool. And I guess that same goes for any way you listen to the podcast. And maybe if you're on Spotify and you can leave a review or something like that, leave a star rating, whatever. Leave any rating, that'd be cool. So just a reminder, because I don't plug it hardly at all, I always forget, is to leave a review or leave a rating on whatever you're listening to the Geek Therapy Radio podcast on. Okay, so at the end of the last segment, I mentioned that while what Nvidia is doing in terms of mitigating cryptocurrency mining that basically screws over content creators and gamers, that while it is egregious, and I'm not completely 100% blaming Nvidia for this. It's not like Nvidia knew, when Nvidia started back in however many decades ago in their current form. It's not like they knew Bitcoin mining was coming. They couldn't. They're playing devil's advocate. They are navigating this cryptocurrency and pandemic world and supply shortage world just like any other company. It just leaves a lot to be desired of the company when they say, yeah, our 3060 is unhackable, wink, wink, and then they release a beta driver that completely bypasses those cryptocurrency mining restrictions. Whoopsie daisy. Oops. A beta driver. What beta driver was it? Maybe I should repeat what the driver was. But at the same time, like I said, it's not like you're going to go out and find a 3060. And just because Nvidia took down the driver doesn't mean that you couldn't find the driver out there. If you were so inclined for big currency or cryptocurrency mining, it's not like you couldn't find it out there. It was the GeForce 470.05 beta driver, the 470.05 beta driver that allowed, I'm quoting this here from techradar.com. I'll read this last little couple sentences of a paragraph. Quote, NVIDIA's GeForce 470.05 beta driver allowed the user to mine Ethereum at the maximum hash rate without needing to modify the driver at all or mess with the BIOS. The driver was quickly removed, but its very existence was enough proof that the limiter could be removed with software. End quote. Why would NVIDIA do that? We went over that in the last segment. If you don't remember if you didn't hear what I mentioned in the last segment about why I thought rhetorically why NVIDIA would do that, you can listen to grab the Geek Therapy Radio podcast. Again, look for the red, white, and black color scheme and you're good to go. So while that is egregious that NVIDIA did that, I mentioned at the last segment that for a lot of us, while NVIDIA is being shady and while that's terrible, it's like some of us don't have the choice to go to Team Red. So you might answer the question of NVIDIA being real shady and real talking out the side of their mouth about cryptocurrency mining and the RTX 3060 specifically, and you think you want to punish NVIDIA by going to buy a graphics card from Team Red, AMD. That is certainly an option. That is almost certainly an option. Graphics cards, no matter who they're from, what manufacturer they're from, are still hard to come by. It's very hard to find a 6800 XT, for instance. It's very hard to find a 5700 XT from AMD, for example. It's hard to find GPUs, period. So, but let's say you could find an AMD GPU. What type of person wouldn't be able to do that, or wouldn't that be the most efficient for? So for me, I can speak directly that my job is video editing for the museum. Well, technically it's YouTube channel manager for the Houston Museum of Natural Science, but I do my fair share of video editing for them. And the program I use is DaVinci Resolve. I've mentioned DaVinci Resolve several times in the show. It's my preferred video editor. It was quite the freaking learning curve coming from Sony Vegas to DaVinci freaking Resolve, but I'm glad I'm getting over that learning curve. But DaVinci Resolve is very much so optimized for CUDA drivers, as opposed to OpenGL driver. I believe that's the case. OpenGL drivers, which AMD is more suitable for. Stream processors, whatever you want to call them. DaVinci Resolve is way more optimized for Team Green. They're way more optimized for CUDA cores, which are from Nvidia. So DaVinci Resolve is much more optimized for Nvidia graphics cards. You can certainly use AMD graphics cards with DaVinci Resolve. It's just not going to be as good of an experience. So for professionals whose workflow is most optimized for CUDA, that means that we don't always have the option, the efficient option, to go for AMD, even if you could get equivalent AMD cards. It's one of those things, and part of me, for cursing here, I try to keep it a PG show. I'm going to say the D word. It's one of those things where right now in 2021, if you're a gamer or content creator, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. It's much less of an issue for gaming. Yes, there are games. Most games are going to either run better on an AMD graphics card, or they'll run better on an Nvidia graphics card. It boils down to individual games. If you're a gamer, I wouldn't suggest that you worry too much about what GPU you can get. So, for instance, if you walk into Micro Center and they don't have any RTX 3000 series graphics cards, but your winner chicken dinner, they do have a really good AMD graphics card there and it's close to MSRP. If you're a gamer, if all you're doing is game, get the card if you can. Go Team Red this time if you can, if all you want to do is game on it. I'd mentioned a few episodes ago that I tried several times to get an RTX 3090 for work. I eventually was able to get an RTX 3090 fairly close to MSRP from EVGA, at least. It was about $1,800. That one of the first or second times that I went there trying to get an RTX card, because it worked best with DaVinci Resolve, I got to the through the line, and they said, we don't have RTX 3090 or 3080 or 3070 for that matter, obviously. But we do have, it was an AMD, what was it? I want to say it was like a 6900 XT. It was a flagship AMD card. It's like, nah, that's okay. And people in the line were just like, dude, what? I was like, I don't need it. I mean, I'm not hurting. I'm not in a rush, really. I haven't started the job yet at this point. But I need an Nvidia card for my workflow. But the gamers are like, dude, you should have taken the freaking AMD when you had the chance. I was like, well, why don't you guys do it? Anyways, more Geek Therapy Radio coming up. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. You've got your mental curator, Johnny Hamburger. By the way, I think this is episode 200. At least that's what it's going to be titled. And I'm hesitant there because I've missed a week or two over the past couple years. I strive to have new content every week. For a while there, I uploaded 5 podcasts a week. So it was 4 podcasts, and then I would upload the broadcast as a podcast. But it was 5 pieces of digital content, 5 podcasts effectively per week. Then baby happened, and that went out the window. Then I went down to like, oh, maybe I can get two out per week. right now, seriously, I know a lot of you out there, support me and you understand. And I've had a few of you on the show, and I've talked to a few of you, your fathers, your mothers. You understand having kids. It's not the You Show. It's not the Johnny Hamburger Show anymore. It is the Riker Show, and he calls the shots. And it's just not so easy to do 5 days a week of content anymore. It's hard to do 2 days a week of content anymore. I'm frankly flabbergasted that I make 1 show per week anymore. I am at the computer all the time. I'm editing things, I'm recording things, I'm out recording things. I'm bouncing my baby boy with my foot to the left, trading off he and mommy. I've mentioned on my Facebook, just my private Facebook, that I do not understand how single parents do it. I cannot even fathom or contemplate how a single mother or a single father can raise even 1 child by themselves, especially a newborn. It's unfathomable. It's unfathomable. It's also unfathomable. Here's a little, just getting personal here. When I see parents with 2 kids of a similar age, and I'm just like, how? I cannot even begin to contemplate having 2 kids in diapers at the same time. It doesn't even register on my radar. How is that even possible? God bless y'all, single parents, and God bless y'all who have 2 kids in diapers at the same time. That's unimaginable. Unimaginable to be dealing with a screaming infant and then a screaming toddler. That's with 2 parents, let alone 1 parent. It boggles my mind. Let's get back to geek stuff. I upgraded I wanted to talk about Godzilla and Kong, but I haven't watched it, so I'll touch on it just for a second here, because I haven't watched it yet. I can't obviously give a review. I can't give my geek score or stick up the butt score until I've seen it. But I can refresh you on what the geek score and stick up your butt critic score is. The stick up your butt score is how I review movies critically. I'm putting it on like, how's the acting, how's the writing, how's the cinematography, how's the sound, how's the visuals, how I'm basically going through with a scalpel and a microscope, dissecting a movie and giving it a critical stick up your butt critic score. So for instance, for those of you who don't remember the last Jurassic Park movie, it was like a geek score of like a B+ or an A-, and then a stick up your butt score of like a D- or F+. It wasn't, the acting's not great. It's not any sort of, it's not going to be a movie that stands the test of time or that you're going to remember in the likes of Casablanca and Sound of Music or anything like that. It's not going to be anything like that. But the geek score was really good, B+ or A-, I forget what it was. So when talking about the last Jurassic Park, I just want to go to Jurassic Park movies to see dinosaurs running amok. So that's why they get really good geek scores. And Star Wars and stuff also gets typically really good geek scores as far as just going to the movie to have fun. And I've equated it to the stick up the butt score being like a beer snob showing up to a beer pong table and taking a sip of the Natty Light inside the Solo cup and be like, this doesn't have the right notes of oakiness and da-da-da. It's not a really good score. This beer really isn't that good. You're missing the whole point. We're playing beer pong here, bud. We're not reviewing how good the beer in the Solo cup is. You're missing the whole point here. It's just to have fun. And that's what I think of movies like Jurassic Park and what I'm going into Kong versus Godzilla, or Godzilla versus Kong, in that kind of mindset. It's a beer pong mindset. I'm not going into it to critically dissect the movie for how good the acting is and how good the movie is critically. I just want to see 2 monsters beat the piss out of each other and things explode. So I would imagine that my geek score, when I do eventually see the movie, is going to be pretty good. I don't want to give what it is because I haven't seen it yet, but I can already just assume that my stick up the butt score is going to be bad or not very good, or at least nowhere near as good as the geek score. I've seen trailers of it. The trailers basically show King Kong and Godzilla smashing aircraft carriers and beating the crap out of each other and shooting lasers out of their mouth. It looks awesome. And that's all you want to see from a King Kong Godzilla movie, is things exploding and blowing up. So I don't imagine how the geek score would be very bad. I haven't seen it yet, like I mentioned, so I'll just get off of it. I want to see it. I just wanted to refresh you, if you're a new listener especially, how my scoring system works. There's the geek score, and then there's the stick up the butt critic score, and they are usually very different. Actually, you know what? The only movie that I come to mind, and I don't want to talk about it too much because I get too butthurt about it, especially if you're a longtime listener of the show, you know what I'm talking about. The last Dumb and Dumber movie with Jack Daniels and Jim Carrey. Jeff Daniels and it would have been better if you had Jack Daniels, but Jeff Daniels and Jim Carrey, the latest canon of Dumb and Dumber movie, was the worst movie I have ever seen in my entire life. What year did that come out? 14 or 15? It was the worst movie ever. The geek score would have been an F-. The critic score would have been bury me 6 feet under the ground. Terrible. It's so horrible. And there's people out there that say, oh, I like The Last Dumb and Dumber. To each their own. I have to kind of like swallow it and let it go. Like, no, it's bad. Let me tell you why it's bad and why your opinion sucks. But I remember people are allowed to have their own opinions. If you like The Last Dumb and Dumber movie, here's a perfect example. The original Dumb and Dumber movie. I think it's one of the best comedies of all time. I think it is critically well written, and the jokes are well timed. I didn't know I was going to go off on such a tangent here. But let's talk about farts for a second and fart humor. So there's fart humor like in the latest Dumb and Dumber movie, which is basically just shock value. There's no build up. There's no writing leading up to the fart. It's just a fart put in there for fart's sake. That's stupid. And I am a huge fan of well-placed scatological fart type of humor, but it has to be like nuanced. So for instance, a lot of people don't like the first Dumb and Dumber. They think it's lowbrow and stupid, and they will quote the scene where Jeff Daniels has massive diarrhea. I talked to James Rolfe like a year or two ago on a show about this. I had him on the show. We were talking about this. And the diarrhea scene, which in the release version is like half as long as it was in the director's cut. It was like twice as long in the director's cut. But here's the reason why that is one of the funniest moments in movie history. It's not because it's just a big, giant, several minutes long sound effects of diarrhea and Jeff Daniels lifting his legs off the ground like he's about to blast off the toilet. It's not just because of that. It's because, if you'll remember, it is so expertly written. It is just an expert payoff to a joke that had been set up several scenes ago, several minutes ago, where Lloyd is sabotaging Harry's date by pouring like a whole bottle of X-Lax in the coffee. So by the time you get to the payoff to that, you're remembering several scenes ago where it was written in here, and you almost kind of forgot that it happened in between then, and then you remember, oh yeah, it's because Lloyd put so much X-Lax in the thing to sabotage the date. And then the commentary that Harry's giving while it's going on, Merry Christmas is like, hey, are you gonna be ready? Oh, I'm just brushing my teeth. Clank. He's like ripping up the toilet. It was a funny joke. It was a well-written fart joke. I got new studio monitors. Atom Audio TV7s or T7Vs. Maybe I'll talk about that in the next show. Thank you so much for listening. You are worthy of love. You're worthy of giving love. You're worthy of receiving love. And you're worthy of your own self-respect. Never forget that. Thank you for listening to Geek Therapy Radio. Take care. If you'd like to sponsor Geek Therapy Radio, just go to geektherapyradio.com and let's talk.